On Monday, January 2nd at 10:42 p.m., the Sheriff's Office received a call at 645 East 21st Street to the Sanctuary Walk Apartments regarding a male who was wanted for an assault charge. The anonymous caller gave the subject's name and vehicle description and said he was wanted for the assault charge and had been making threatening phone calls to that caller and driving in and out of the complex repeatedly. An officer arrived at 11:01 p.m. and was not able to find the subject. That officer checked the name provided and found that there was a warrant for felony aggravated assault on the person by the name given in the call. Not finding him, that officer left the area. At 11:20 p.m., JSO received another call from presumably the same anonymous person advising that the subject was back. Another, different officer, Officer B. Kremler, was dispatched and arrived at the call at 11:30 p.m. When this officer arrived at the call, the officer from the first call made contact with him and advised him that the subject was indeed wanted and she had verified that there was a warrant for him and gave him the physical description of the suspect. The second officer, when this officer arrived at the call, he did indeed find the silver Dodge Charger, which was described in both calls, parked in the back of the complex behind building number 1. The officer attempted to contact the subject, who was alone in the driver's seat of the running car. After repeated attempts to contact that subject were unsuccessful, that officer called for a backup, who arrived a short minutes later. Subject did not respond to any of the officer's commands to identify himself by either Officer Kremler or the backup officer who arrived. The backup officer arrived at the call approximately 1 minute after Officer Kremler asked for the backup. Both officers, after attempting to make contact with the subject and gain his compliance, Officer Kremler walks back to his car to get a tool to break the window of the subject's car. When Officer Kremler was reaching inside of his car, Officer Bueno saw that the subject put his vehicle in reverse, revved the engine, and began to back up towards Officer Kremler's car. Fearing for the safety of Officer Kremler, Officer Bueno discharged his issued handgun at the subject 4 times. The suspect was struck by the projectiles multiple times and was transported to Shands Hospital. At this time, the subject remains in critical but stable condition. As detected for processing the car, a loaded .40 caliber handgun was located hammer-cocked underneath the driver's side floor mat of that vehicle. It is unknown if the subject was making efforts to use the firearm against the officers, who gave no account during the incident of seeing the subject being armed. The subject was indeed the person named in both of the calls and has been absentee booked on the felony domestic battery warrant, which stemmed from a case back in October of this year, of last year. The subject is also a person of interest in a sex crimes case from July of 2011 involving a 19-year-old female with whom he was acquainted. Charges from last night's incident are pending still, but include the possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and possession of drugs which were found in the car. I can answer a few questions.
Pretty stupid of him to do that.
It's not a good idea.
Were the officers placed on administrative leave following?
Both officers were placed on administrative leave as per policy after this incident.
I looked at the clerk of courts, and I thought that he'd already served his time and paid his fine on that ag charge.
The warrant was still active in the system on that particular charge back from October of this year.
Okay.
So,
Questions? What kind of drugs? You know?
it was marijuana that was in the car.
Do we know if this caller was the person that he had hurt in October?
The caller was anonymous.
Okay.
So.
You're saying the guy fired, one of the officers, Bueno, fired a handgun?
Officer Bueno fired his issued handgun 4 times at the subject.
And where did it hit the subject?
In his upper torso.
Questions?
Last night he was listed in life-threatening condition, but now you're saying he's critical.
At this point in time, it's critical but stable.
Could you spell the names of those 2 officers, please?
Sure. B. Kremler, Kremler. And the second officer, the shooting officers, R. Bueno, Bueno.
How long were they on the force?
Believe that the shooting officer has been on 6 years, and I'm not sure about the second.
Did the car actually ram the car? Or did he get him before?
The subject's vehicle actually did make contact with the officer's car. I, through the PIO, provided both JPIC's picture from his previous arrest, which is obviously not from last night, as well as 2 photographs of the firearm which was found in the subject's car, which will get those electronically.
Cool.
Any other
So
questions?
the officer acted accordingly, Bueno, there won't be any charges pending against him?
At this point in time, the state attorney does a separate investigation into the use of deadly force, and the results will come from them.
And you believe that the suspect was using the car as a weapon against the officer?
Yes, ma'am. And then that's the perception of the officer at the time.
And that's also SOP standard, state attorney always does this, right?
Yeah, that is standard. That's nothing out of the ordinary in this case. They'll always do a separate investigation into the use of deadly force.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thanks.
You were out there